So about that, there was an advert that disrupted the video. Okay, so, and then there's American ska, which, is stuff like Operation Ivy, in the 90s. Yeah, we won't waste too much time on that. So that is what that article has led me to research. It's led me to kind of really explore all three of these kind of waves of music, and it's helped me to sort of understand. Okay, so now I'm going to go on to why I have so many folk rock, sort of Scandinavian-like metal influences. One of the other main fusions genre I am digging into in this unit is folk metal, and I looked at an article here, which is like about sort of the creation of folk music, about how a band called Skyclawed from England essentially were the first band to be classed as folk metal, and how how that has influenced a lot of bands. It's influenced a band called Subway to Sally's to create their own genre called medieval rock, and it's also influenced Celtic metal and symphonic folk metal. The reason why I didn't include any examples of normal symphonic metal is because I felt that would be a bit irrelevant to, it would be sort of seizing out the folk bit, which is irrelevant to this project, and I personally felt that it would just kind of make me spiral into researching a bunch of subgenres of metal that, and this video would actually take forever. So, and folk metal has also influenced Celtic metal. So let's see some examples of folk metal.
All the seats are taken in the house that makes the rules. All the seats are taken in the Parliament of Fools. All the seats are taken in the house that makes the rules. All the seats are taken in the Parliament of Fools.
Alright, I've already shown the song, so let's carry on. And then you have medieval, what is known as medieval rock. So yeah, it says in the article that Subway to Sally's were influenced by Skyclawed, and how they sort of made their sound their own. That's how they came up with their own self-made genre. So that's pretty cool. And you got Celtic metal, and Celtic metal does take more of a genuine Scandinavian influence. So if we just... yeah, much more clearer. And a lot of Celtic metal music with vocals tend to, or just lyrics in general, they tend to take a lot of influence from Scandinavian mythology. And then we have this here, symphonic folk metal, which is like Celtic and folk metal, but with synth. So yeah, that's kind of what I grasped onto, and I used this here to kind of prove that I knew that Skyclawed were the oldest folk metal band. Okay, there. and it has the year where they're formed and stuff like that. And all the other bands are of a later date, apart from this one. And if you look here, it says that they started off as a black metal band. They didn't actually have the folk metal influence till later. Right. So yeah, that was quite good for making my research more, more accurate, I suppose. Okay. Now this video here is relevant to my research.
Hey, it's Andrew Huang. How would you decide on the
Right,
best
let's
song
just
of
carry
the
this
past
forward.
year? Would it be what you makes the performances that much more powerful? And how about genre? That is an unmistakable drum and bass breakbeat, but it's been lifted from a genre that is typically cutting and aggressive and electronic and...
Okay, so basically this video is an analysis of a song called Find Me by Sigma. And he essentially talks about how the song's amazing, and he does this very well. He says stuff like how this is a pop song that uses classical instrumentation and then drum and bass beats and stuff like that. Which, I agree with him, it is a clever thing, although I don't think it's a great song. There are loads of pop songs like that. They use samba beats and stuff like that, like Havana. And although I disagree with him saying it's a great song, but I do agree that there were some clever things in the production of the song. And it's kind of led me to realize that a lot of pop songs take influence from other genres. So I suppose you could call pop a fusion genre, really. So, yeah. And this is a sub-article of the primary source of what I used, which is where is it? Well, it's from Britannia.com, and it's about jazz fusion, more specifically jazz rock. And there we go. It's kind of tells you like the basics of it and how it started off, how it developed, and yeah, and essentially how it's used other genres such as funk, hip hop, bop, or bebop if you want to call it that. And it does have and it mentions how it's got a free jazz kind of momentum to it. And this is a sub-article from this about how this person here was like a really key player in the jazz rock kind of like era or field, sorry. And how he's taken like flamenco influences and, he used blues rock and how he incorporated that into jazz rock and how that's kind of been a really influential stasis in the field. Okay, moving on. I've already talked about this source. Okay. From researching folk metal on an article, I didn't find it worthy of putting it here. I saw related genres and it said folk rock, and I thought it would be interesting to look at. There are no like official ties to folk rock and folk metal, but it essentially, like this is a Wikipedia page, but it says essentially it started off in the 60s with people like the Byrds, Bob Dylan, the Beatles. Like I wouldn't say the Beatles are strictly folk rock. I get why they would say Bob Dylan and the Byrds are folk rock, because they do sort of have that rocky edge to their folk playing. I mean, I'd argue that it's more related to folk than actual rock, personally. But I totally get where they're coming from. There's a lot of comments. I didn't include all of them because I didn't find them, because I thought this thing would just last forever. And a lot of them think that Skyclad did take influence from folk rock, whereas that's actually not true. But I can totally see why they would think that. There's a very similar premise to how those genres created, and I have some examples of folk rock here. Some Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, Jimi Hendrix, etc. Okay, moving on to Mr. Bungle. This is an interview of Mr. Bungle, Mike Patton, the vocalist from Mr. Bungle, voicing his views on music and, etc. Having a nice sandwich.
They're not like, they're not really, I can't say that word, industrial, it's a bad word, anymore. Soundgarden, Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh, that's just, sorry.
Okay. What bands do you think have been most influential in the past year and why?
Influential to who?
To people in general.
I would have to say, Queen, ELO, and the Carpenters.
And why?
I don't know. I hear a lot of what they're doing in new sounds today, such as Nirvana, Soundgarden, Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's sort of a rehashed thing. I think it's more, the new sound is really an old sound. No, music sucks. I hate all music now. I don't know. I really don't like to listen to music very much anymore.
Why is that? Because you just think no one's original?
I don't know. Nothing's doing it. I'm not going to blame anybody, but I'll let you know when I figure it out, but I haven't figured it out yet. But I don't know. I'm just not. I go into the record store and I look for like 2 hours. And usually I just end up going to the soundtrack section. But,
Yeah. So that was him voicing his views on music, and it's gave me an insight to how, how the creation process of Mr. Bungle sort of makes sense, because they sort of seem to gather influence from anywhere and everywhere. And this is an interview where the band say that, they started off as a death metal band, sorry. And here it is, how they started off as a death metal band, and, they still kind of gather influence of death metal in their future projects, which makes sense because, you can kind of hear that they use a lot of, in their songs, they do have some heavy choruses and some, really sinister sounds. Okay, let's move on. Okay, yeah. All right, so just 3 more. Lucky you. So this one's a positive. I brought up 2 reviews of the Mr. Bungle album, a positive one and a bad one. Well, not bad. They gave him a 3.5, which isn't terrible, but so basically, this guy basically says that Mr. Bungle break all the rules, and they're out there and stuff like that, and they use so many. You can hear about 2 or 3 genres per song. I'd argue you can hit probably more than that, if I'm honest. Gentle Insanity and stuff like that, and how the playing was great and how everything was well composed, blah 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 blah, which I agree. I think it's a great album, but that's just an opinion. And here's some bad reviews. So this one is basically saying how the main points were the music doesn't let you into its world too easily, so it's not so pleasurable to listen to. You have to kind of get used to it, and how the songs are written badly. Personally, I do agree with because I get how a lot of people think that Mr. Bungle is very not welcoming to listen to. I get how it can scare people off at first moment. I would have to disagree with the bad songwriting part, though, because if you listen to songs such as quote unquote My Ass on Fire, etc., there's form to those songs, you know. They aren't just going from genre and genre, going needlessly, you know. They have form. They have choruses, verses, etc., and bridges as well, you know. So I think this guy just sort of went about it too negatively. Okay. Now this is one that's kind of interesting. Like, so basically, this guy says, "Oh, they're good players and everything, but the music sucks." And personally, from the way how he's written it, he didn't really back himself up. He's just kind of going, "Oh, I don't like it." And, you know, and that's cool if you don't like something, but that doesn't make it officially bad. Like, it's just a very kind of bad opinion. Well, not a bad opinion. No opinions are bad. Don't have the capability of being bad. But, you know. So, yeah, I would have to disagree with that opinion, but I'd be disagreeing it with my opinion, so therefore no one wins, no one loses. Hurrah. And this one is quite interesting. So basically, it's just Chappie here saying that all punk music is usually played at a BPM of around 140 to 200. And, you know, the percussion is very similar to polka or marching music. I'd highly disagree with that because, you know, I'm sure everyone has, you know, they've heard punk songs at a very slower tempo. Like, you know, this song here. It's not all that slower than 140, but you know what I mean. You know, you can get, and you know, that's not what punk's all about. It's not all essentially being about fast and hitting as many as possible. It's about sort of the rebellion, because like that early set of punk, as we've kind of discussed in college, was related to this band. Well, not this band particularly, but this is pop rock, you know.
And I think it's a really interesting shift here, because suddenly you've got this emphasis. Farron in the NME said that really looked different. It kind of creates the video age, you know, and the increasing emphasis.
Somebody hold you tight. A rock set. I wondered who it could be. It was so dark I couldn't see it, but I know it wasn't me. When I tell you it ain't right, I know you got to agree.
But yeah, obviously you can tell that's not fast, you know. But, you know, it is essentially the precursor to punk, you know? Like, I mean, hey, not even the Sex Pistols were even that fast, essentially. It's already there. So this is probably arguably the most successful punk band ever to exist. So that's a pretty normal tempo really, and obviously there was no marching drums, there were no polka drums, you know, they were just pretty standard beats. So I found that argument extremely flawed. Well, sorry, that status anyway. Like, and you know, it's kind of like how, and you know, not all ska music needs like to have a ton of offbeats, you know, and you know, not all alternative music must be melodic. You know, it can be rough and it can be dirty, and not all blues music needs to be in the 12 bar. It can, you know. Thank you.